Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Macmillan Education Iberia In Focus event for Heroes, the primary course, the Macmillan Education primary course, which is new. And I hope that you're all very well this evening. I know that this has been a really hard year for you all. It's been very difficult. You've had to deal with some very challenging times. So I just want to say congratulations to you all on the tremendous work that you've been doing this year to keep children's schooling going. I'm the events manager at Macmillan Education. My name is Louise Connolly and I will be your host this evening. And now I would like to introduce Emma Mohamed, our speaker today. Hello, Emma. How are you?
Hi, Louise. I'm good,
Hi,
thanks.
good evening. Thank you for joining us. Just to explain a little bit, Emma is a qualified British primary school teacher. She taught in Britain, and then in 2000 she moved to Spain. She's taught in San Sebastian and Barcelona, and since 2004 she has taught English to primary age and pupils in the school Frederic Mistral in Barcelona, and she is the author of the Macmillan Education Quest Levels 5 and 6, and co-author of the Macmillan Education Heroes Levels 1 to 4. So it's a real privilege to have her here today with us because we can learn many things from her insights and her experience. What's really important, she is a practicing primary teacher, and so she can identify totally with your situation, and I think she'll have a lot to share with us, which will be practical and applicable to our classes. And her talk today is called It's Good to Talk. So over to you, Emma.
Thanks, Louise. Okay, first, welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining us and for giving up your time to join us today. Louise has already told you pretty much everything about me. I'll just say once more, first I was a primary school teacher in the UK, then I came to Spain about 20 years ago, and since then I've been teaching English as a foreign language to young learners. And as Louise said, I was an author of Quest Levels 5 and 6 and co-author of Heroes Levels 1 to 4. Okay, so the name of this webinar is It's Good to Talk. So as the name suggests, this webinar is about speaking and the importance of doing speaking in our English primary school classrooms. Okay, let's get on then. So why do I think that it's important to do speaking activities in the English primary school classroom? Well, first, speaking is one of the 4 language skills that we need to help our students develop, along with reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Speaking is also really important when it comes to communication, and I think communication is one of the main focuses behind learning languages. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, most of my young learners, and I'm sure your young learners, really enjoy speaking English in the classroom. But doing speaking activities in our classrooms can be challenging. And so before we continue, I want to talk a little bit about the challenges that we face as teachers. And I've made a list, which you can see on the slide, of what I think of as the main challenges for teachers when it comes to doing speaking in our classroom. So the first challenge that I've noted down is that we have lots of different abilities in our classrooms. And so we need speaking activities which all our students can do. Some of our students are shyer than other students, and those students find speaking more difficult than other students, and we need to help them. This year with COVID, we've had the extra challenge of social distancing and mask wearing. I don't know about you, but I have found mask wearing particularly has made doing speaking even more difficult. We also need to think about class management. What is everybody in our class doing while we're doing speaking activities? And finally, correction can be tricky when it comes to speaking activities. And we need to think about how and when we correct our students when they're doing speaking activities. I would say that it's more difficult than correcting a written activity, for example, because speaking is a transient activity and it's not on a page. So before we continue with this webinar, I'd really like to hear from you. I'd like for you to have your say. And this is my question to all of you. What has been the biggest challenge for you this year in relation to doing speaking activities in your English classroom? You could either choose one of the challenges that I've listed, or maybe you have another challenge that I haven't mentioned. Whichever, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you have found to be the biggest challenge this year in terms of speaking activities.
Okay, so as Emma has said, on your screen now you will see the question, what has been the biggest challenge for you this year? And Emma has outlined some of the challenges, or the most important challenges she has faced this year. Perhaps one of those resonates with you. It might be one that you share. Or as she said, you may have another challenge which wasn't listed there on the PowerPoint. So please send in your answers. You can write short answers if you like, and we'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. Okay, let's see what's coming in. We'll just give people a couple of more seconds. I can imagine, Emma, that in terms of speaking, yes, mask wearing must be an incredibly tall challenge to
it's very hard
deal
for
with.
them to understand us, but also it's so difficult to understand them if they talk quietly or if they mumble a bit with the mask. I would say that's been the real extra challenge this year, for me anyway. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so we're getting some answers. I can see, yes, people are saying different abilities, mixed ability has been a real challenge. This is something that we, for example, have noticed in contact with teachers from our end, from Macmillan Education, and we've been in touch with schools, with teachers, and it's been a real challenge when pupils were, and everybody was in lockdown and connecting up from home, different situations. Every home is a world unto its own, isn't it? And that was incredibly challenging. And as a result, then when pupils went back in and teachers went back into the schools, teachers found that there were differences, important differences in levels. So that was a real challenge for people. Another was, yes, mask wearing, that's another one. And classroom management. I think this is interesting because after a long period of time out of the classroom situation at home, it has had an impact, or it certainly did at the beginning, I would imagine, when people went back to school. Trying to establish or re-establish routines and manage classes, and that would have an impact on activities that were centered around communication and speaking. So yes, And yeah, correction, yes, as you said, yeah, that's another one that's come up. Correction is difficult because, as you say, not like it's very different from correcting a piece of
Yeah.
writing on the
Mm.
page. So it's when do you correct and how do you correct? And
Yeah,
should it
exactly.
be individual or should it be at a group level? Should it be during, be after, etc.? Okay, that's great. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thanks, Louise, and thank you everybody for sending in your challenges. Yeah, I think different abilities in our classes is always an issue, and yeah, maybe it's been made more of an issue from lockdown when children weren't in school. And yeah, we had to re-establish our rules again when children had been out of school for so long. Although I also did find that a lot of my students were really happy to be back as well. And a lot of them were really motivated to get back to school and get back to class. Anyway, let's continue then. So these are some of the challenges that we face, in particular when we are doing speaking activities. And so when I called this webinar, It's Good to Talk, maybe what I really mean is it's good to talk successfully. Yeah. And what I really want to focus on in this webinar is how we as teachers can help our students, our young learners, speak successfully. And I've divided this webinar into three main parts in order to answer this question. So I just want to give an outline of the webinar now. So in order to help our students speak successfully, I think it's important that we, one, give students a model so they know what to say and how to say it. I also think that we need to give students the opportunity to practice, practice, practice. And finally, I also think it's important that we give our students the chance to show what they can do and what they can say. And by doing these three things, I believe we can help our students speak more successfully. So let's now get on with what I mean by this. So it's good to model in order to help our students speak successfully. By modeling, I mean that we are really making sure our students know what to say and how to say it. Why is this important? Well, modeling helps our students to speak clearly and accurately. And this in turn helps our students to communicate successfully. We need to understand what they are saying in order for them to communicate successfully. When is it a good idea to model? Well, I think the main times when we want to focus on modeling when it comes to speaking is when we introduce new vocabulary or a new structure. And we usually do modeling via controlled speaking activities, often as a whole class. And when it comes to correction in terms of modeling, I think this is really the time when we want to correct them and focus on accuracy and really correct them as much as possible when they make mistakes at this stage. Okay, let's continue. So when I say that I think we need to do controlled activities, most of the time when we model in our course books, for example, in Heroes, the main modeling that we do is listen and repeat. Right? That is the kind of most basic form of modeling. And we do that when we introduce new vocabulary and when we introduce new structures. There'll be an audio or a video and we get the students to listen and repeat. Okay, but then we know that there are certain things that our students have more problems with. Really, I'm talking about pronunciation here. I'm talking about modeling sounds word stress and intonation. Yeah. And as well as listen and repeat, we need to focus on the particular problems our students have in order to help them improve and communicate successfully. So, for example, with my year ones, we were doing a topic about animals. And so we listened and we repeated after the animals on the audio. But then I know that my students find some sounds particularly difficult. So, for example, my students find the difference between dog and duck difficult. Yeah. And this is important for them to communicate if their favorite animal is a dog, but they say it's a duck. Yeah. Now, normally I would rely on my students being able to look at my mouth and to see what my mouth does when I'm saying dog as opposed to duck. But of course, this year with masks, we haven't been able to rely on that. And that's been a challenge. So I wanted to share some tips that I have found useful this year. So for example, with my mask, I'm going to put my mask on so we can see what it's like. Okay, so when I was teaching the difference between dog and duck, obviously they can't see my mouth. So I found it really helpful to use my finger and to draw my mouth on top of my mask for my students. So I said to the students, this is what my mouth is doing. Look, it's making this shape, dog. And I got the students to make the same shape with their finger on top of their mouth and to listen and repeat. So I said, dog, now you. Right. We practiced that a few times. And then I said, now look, my mouth is different with duck. This is what my mouth does. Duck, duck. And I got the students to listen and repeat and to do the same hand movement as me. And I was surprised by how well they did. In fact, I think that really when we don't have to wear masks anymore, I'm going to use my finger more because it really made them think about what their mouth was doing. Okay, with my year twos, we had been learning the days of the week. So we listened and repeated, as is the modeling stage. But then I know that my year twos find the difference between Tuesday and Thursday. They find that very difficult, that difference. And so this time, because I have my mask on in class, I decided to do a little video at home to show my students. And I have found that really helpful this year. I just make a little video without my mask on the night before class, just concentrating on whatever the difficult sounds are. And then I show it to them in my class. I know we all hate making videos of ourselves, but this is literally on my mobile phone and I'm only going to show it to my students in class. It doesn't have to be professional in any way. It's just a chance for them to see my mouth and my face. So I want to give you an example of one I used with my year two class to show the difference between Tuesday and Thursday. So here is an example of a video clip. Look at my mouth and my tongue and listen. Tuesday, Thursday. Now, listen and repeat. Ready? Tuesday, Thursday. Good. Listen and repeat again. Ready? Tuesday. Good. Thursday. Good. Okay, so that was just an example to show you what I mean when I say it can be useful to video yourself in order to model a difficult sound or a difficult pair of sounds to your students while we're having to wear masks in the classroom. Using your hands, using your body also helps when it comes to modeling different sounds, different stress, different intonation. For example, with my year 6, we were looking at the different stress involved in numbers like 13 and 30. And so I find it helpful to clap in order to highlight the stress. So I'd say 13, 30. Yeah, and they do the same. Body language, using your hands, can help when it comes to intonation too. So with my year 1 class, when we were doing the animal topic, I then wanted them to ask each other, what's your favorite animal? And so I use my fist and I say, what's your favorite animal? What's your favorite animal? To show them where the stress is, and also to highlight the fact that we go down at the end of a question in English. So these are the kind of things that I have found useful in order to model usefully for my students, and I hope that they'll be helpful for you too. Moving on then, as well as modeling, I think it's really important to practice, practice, practice in order for our students to speak successfully in the English classroom. I don't think we can practice too much. Why? Well, practicing helps all our students improve and is especially important for the lower level students in our classes, but it helps all our students. Also, practice helps our shy students develop confidence, and that's really important for those students. When is a good time to practice speaking? Well, I think it's after we've introduced new vocabulary and after we've introduced new structures. And the type of activities for practicing speaking tend to be less controlled than modeling, and often will be in pairs or small groups. And in terms of correction, I think this is a great time for us to go around the class and give individual correction to our students. And now, rather than focusing so much on accuracy, we now want to really focus more on communication. Are they communicating successfully enough? So on the slide at the bottom, you'll see that I've put a little box where I've written, practice makes perfect, but variety is the spice of life. So I think it's really important to practice, practice, practice when it comes to speaking, but we need to have some variety when we do this in order to keep our students motivated. So now I want to share with you some activities that I find particularly helpful when it comes to practicing speaking. So the first activity that I want to talk to you about is one that I call traffic lights. And I do this with my year 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, okay? And I usually do this practice activity to practice a new vocabulary set, okay? So for example, in Heroes levels 3 to 6, each unit starts in lesson 1 with a new vocabulary set. And then there is a question for students to ask and answer in pairs in order to practice and personalize the new vocabulary set. That question is using recycled structures in order to practice the new vocabulary set. So on the slide, you can see that the example that I've given is from Heroes 3. The vocabulary set is food, and the question that is in the course book in order to practice that new vocabulary is, do you like fish and chips? And the students answer, yes, I do. No, I don't. So in order to do this activity, I display the vocabulary on the board. You can either project it onto the whiteboard from the book, or you can use flashcards. But the students need to be able to see the new vocabulary set. Then I model that question with a student. So I model the question, do you like beans? And I get a student to answer, yes, I do, no, I don't. Then I ask all the students to stand up, and I have a traffic light. And when I show them the green light, I say, go, and all the students walk around the class. And then when I show them the red light, I say, stop, and all the students stop. Then they have to ask the student nearest them the question that I practiced with them, choosing any of the vocabulary they want that is displayed. And one student asks the other student answers, and then that student asks the question and the other student answers. And they continue asking and answering until I say, go. And when I say go, all the students have to stop talking, even if they're in the middle, and then they have to move around the class again. This basically is just a way of doing pair work, but they're moving, they're talking to different students. It's motivating. It's not just ask the student sitting next to you. Incidentally, this activity also works if you have got a student joining you from home on the computer. If you have a student who is confined at home but joining you, you can just say that that computer where that student is from home counts as a student. So the student that's nearest the computer can ask that student the question. So it can involve a student who is at home. My students really enjoy it. It's really simple. It takes no preparation. Then with my years 5 and 6, I do basically the same activity, but without the traffic lights. So for example, in Heroes 5, there's a topic about places in town. So first, display the new vocabulary, project it from the book or show the flashcards, model the question that is in the book. In this case, it's what's your favorite place in town and why? And then no traffic light, this time say walk, walk, and the students have to walk. And then the teacher says talk, talk, and the students have to stop, find the student nearest them, and ask and answer the question, choosing the places that they want to use, which are displayed. It's the same activity, but a variation to make it a bit more grown up for the older students. Another activity, which I like to do with my students in order to practice speaking, is one I call One Class, Two Lines. Now, this activity I did with my Year 2 class, and we were practicing a new structure rather than new vocabulary, a new structure. The structure was from Heroes 2, and it's, do you go swimming on Monday? Yes, I do, or no, I don't. Routine activities with days of the week. So in order to do this speaking practice activity, I asked my students to stand up and stand in 2 lines, one behind the other, 2 lines facing each other with a table in between the 2 lines. There's a diagram on the slide. Then on the table facing one line, which on the slide I'm going to call the blue line, I displayed a prompt to help the students form questions using the new structure. And I used this prompt from the communication kit for Heroes 2. It basically just helps the students form questions. So this prompt was on the table facing the blue line. Then the first student in the blue line asks the first student in the red line a question, which is practicing the new structure. So the person in the blue line says, do you go swimming on Monday? And then the first person in the red line thinks and answers truthfully, yes, I do, or no, I don't. Then those two students go to the back of the line. There's now a new student at the front of the blue line and a new student at the front of the red line. The new student at the front of the blue line asks another question. For example, do you play tennis on Tuesday? And the new student at the front of the red line answers, yes, I do, or no, I don't. They then go to the back of the line, and so on. Again, it's just another way of doing pair work to practice speaking. But instead of just sitting at their table talking to the person next to them, they're in a different place, they're standing up and they're talking to different people. It just keeps the motivation and the dynamics going in the class. I managed to record a small audio when I was doing this activity with my year twos, with you in mind, so that you could hear what it sounds like when they do this activity. So here's a small clip from my year two class.
Martina, do you go swimming on Monday? No, I don't. Lucia, do you go tennis on Tuesday? Yes, I do. Do you watch a film on Wednesday? No, I don't.
Okay, so they're my year twos doing this activity. They really enjoyed it. And it's great for the teacher because you're at the front with them and you can help them as they're going along. And the students that struggle, you can help them get the question. Anyway, mine really enjoyed it. It's just a different way to do a practice speaking activity. Games are also a great way to practice speaking. I'm going to share with you a game that I played with my year two class again, which I've called Guess the Flashcard. Now, this is actually a game to practice that same structure and vocabulary. Do you go swimming on Monday? Yes, I do. No, I don't. Now, this is actually a communication game that is in the course book, in this case, Heroes 2, which the students can play in pairs. But I find it really useful to often take games from the course book and to play them first as a class. And this is what I did with this game. So for this game, I had the routine activity flashcards, okay? And I stuck them on the board face down, and I stuck 5 on the board. And then I put the days of the week above them so the children could see them. You can see it on the slide. So there's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and one flashcard face down under each day of the week. So the aim of the game is for the students to guess what day I do the routine activities on. And that's how they win. They love to play against me. They love to beat me, the class against me. So they put their hand up and they say, Emma, do you go shopping on Tuesday? And so I look without showing them if the card under Tuesday is go shopping. And if it isn't, then I say, no, I don't. And nothing changes. But if it is, I turn the card around, as you can see on the slide. They keep asking me questions until they have guessed all the routines I do on each day of the week. The game ends when all the flashcards are facing the students, as you can see on the slide. And then I say, oh, well done. Yeah, you beat me. You got all the routines. Well done. The great thing about games for practice activities is that the students aren't even aware that they're practicing. They're not even aware they're speaking English because the game is what's important. as I said, this is a game that is actually in the course book for them to play in pairs. So I play it as a class first, extra practice, and then they play it in pairs or small groups. And the great thing is, if you do it as a class first, then they know exactly how to play the game, which helps with class management. And they know exactly what they have to say. So now I want to play a small audio clip from my class of Year 2s. It's a group of 3 girls, and they are playing that same game that I did as flashcards at their own table with little pictures of activities. So now listen to the Year 2 students.
Vale. Do you see friends on Friday? No, I don't. Do you see friends on Saturday? Saturday no está, ¿eh? No está Saturday. Ay, claro. Tuesday? See friends. No, I don't.
Okay, so they're my Year 2 students. I wanted you to hear them so you could see that they knew how to play the game. We'd already played it as a class. You can hear that the students in the background are playing and are motivated, yeah, because they're going, oh, I've got 2. And finally, another great thing about them playing games in pairs or small groups is that they end up correcting each other. You heard that one of the girls said Saturday, and the other girl said, well, we're not talking about Saturday. Yeah, they correct each other. And also I wanted you to hear that the class gets noisy when we're doing these kinds of activities. And I believe that's okay. And I think that we need to accept that sometimes, especially when we're practicing speaking, we're going to have noisy classes for a short amount of time. Okay. So that was a game that I do with my Year 2s. And I wanted just to share one more game that I find really useful in my classes. This is a game that I usually do with Year 5s or Year 6s. And it's a variation on the communication activities which are based on true or false. And there are quite a lot of communication practice activities like this in Heroes 5 and 6 and in other course books too. But I like to play this as a whole class. And I change the name when I play the game of my class, and I call this activity Liar, Liar. So this is a game I played with my Year 6 last month, and it was to practice the present perfect for talking about general experience. Okay, and I want to play this game with you, please. I know it's not the same, that we're not all in the same room and I can't see you and really play it with you. So let's just pretend to play it together. Okay, so I write 3 sentences on the board, and they are sentences about me and my experience. Okay, and I say to my students, there are 3 sentences about me, but 1 sentence is false. And you have to guess which is the false sentence. And I say to the students, you can ask me 3 questions about each sentence. I will answer them, and then at the end, you have to decide which is false. Are you going to try this as well, Louise? Yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
So obviously I can't ask you all to send in the questions. We haven't got time. So I'm going to tell you the questions that my students asked me. And I'm going to tell you the answers that I gave them. And when I finished, I'm going to ask you to tell me which sentence you think is false. Okay? So you do need to listen to the
Okay.
questions and answers, everybody, so that after you can send me your answer. Okay. So the first sentence on the board says, I've visited the pyramids in Egypt. Okay. And my students asked me these questions. When did you visit them? And so I answered, I was in Egypt when I was 8 years old, and that's when I visited them. So the students asked me, why? Why were you in Egypt? So I answered, because I lived there for 1 year, because my mum was an English teacher there. And then they asked me, what were the pyramids like? And I said, yeah, they were amazing. They're really big. There were 3 of them. And there was also the Sphinx, which is a big sculpture of a cat. Okay. Number 2, I've been on the London Eye. The London Eye is the big wheel in London, yeah? So that was my sentence number 2. And my students asked me 3 questions. They asked me, who did you go with? And I said, I went with my 2 children, Danny and Nico. And of course, they know my children because I've been teaching them for a year. Yeah. They were like, okay. And then they said, when did you go? And I said, I went 4 or 5 years ago. And then they asked me, and what did you see on the London Eye? And I said, I saw beautiful views of London. I saw Big Ben. I saw the River Thames and some bridges. Okay. And then my sentence number 3 on the board was, I've eaten ostrich meat. And obviously I had to check that the students knew what was an ostrich, the big, big bird that puts its head in the sand. Yeah. And they asked me, where did you eat ostrich meat? And I answered, in South Africa, in a restaurant. And they said, when? And I said, well, I was in South Africa when I was about 20 at university. I went there for a few weeks. And they said, what was it like? And I said, it was delicious. Ostrich meat is really similar to steak, but it's a bit healthier because it's a white meat. Okay, so they've read the sentences, they've asked me the questions, and I've answered. And I've done the same with you, everybody. So now I want you to decide, based on my answers, which sentence is false. Is it sentence number 1? Is it sentence number 2 or number 3? So can you send in your answer, 1, 2, or 3 now, please? Louise, what's your opinion? Louise doesn't know.
No, I don't know. I could possibly get it totally wrong, but I have a feeling that number 3
Okay,
is
I'm
not
not going to say
correct.
anything yet because I want to see what other people say. I can tell you that a lot of my students chose number 3. A lot of them thought that was false, but I'm not going to answer yet until we know what other people think.
Well, actually, there are 60% who are saying number 3 and 40% number 1, and nobody is saying number 2. So put us out of our misery.
So actually, your answers are very similar to my students. I would say most students thought it was number 3, and then a lot of students thought it was number 1, and very few students thought it was number 2. Well, I'm very sorry, everybody, but the false sentence is number 2. I haven't been on the London Eye. And that's when all my students say, but Emma, you're from London. And I say, yes, but you don't do the tourist things when you're in your country, in your place. So I haven't been on the London Eye. And so you can imagine they love to find out more about you. They love to try and guess and try and catch you out. And of course, when they're asking me, they're also looking at my face and trying to catch me out and things like that. It's easier in person, yeah, because obviously they're trying to see, what is she lying about? Let's catch her out, yeah. But they really love it. And then after we've played it as a game, as a whole class, then of course they can then go and play it in pairs or small groups. And so they each write 3 sentences about themselves. 1 is false. They're using the present perfect to talk about past experience. They ask each other the questions, they lie for some of the answers, and they really enjoy it. Doing it as a class first means they know exactly what they're doing. And again, it's a game. They don't even notice they're speaking English. They don't even notice they're practicing because they want to win the game. Okay. Final part of the webinar then, before we finish. In order to help our students speak successfully, I think it's important to model, to practice, and finally, to show what they can say and do. And really by this, I mean to provide them with speaking activities which give them the opportunity to show what they can say. Speaking activities like role plays, interviews, and presentations. Okay, why do I think it's important? Well, because students, when they do these types of activities, can experiment and take risks with language because they're freer activities. And this is especially important, I think, for our higher level students to be able to shine, to be able to take risks, to improve. By doing these types of speaking activities, I think all students get to feel a sense of achievement, and that's motivating for them, low level and high level. And maybe most importantly, in my experience, most students love doing these types of speaking activities where they show what they can say, even the shyer students, as long as they have practiced enough. And when do these types of activities? Well, I usually do them at the end of a unit to finish a unit. And for example, in Heroes levels 1 to 4, every unit ends with this type of show what you can say speaking activity. These are activities that our students usually do in front of the class, and they are freer speaking activities. Now, in terms of correction, this is where I don't tend to give individual feedback, individual correction. I don't correct them while they are speaking. I don't want to demotivate them. I generally give general feedback to the class after we've finished. I'll come back to that in a minute. So, for example, I'm not going to go into great detail about all the different types of speaking activities here. But for example, with my year 1s, after the animal topic, we then did a show what you can do activity where they did a role play in a pet shop and they asked for an animal in a shop. With my year 2, as you can see on the slide, I did, for example, an interview, and I wanted to show this slide because this was the final speaking task, the show what you can do at the end of the unit, which had concentrated on days of the week, routine activities, and that question that we'd practiced earlier in the 2 class 1 lines activity. Oh, do you go swimming on Monday? Yes, I do. No, I don't. And so you can see on the slide that eventually the students came up in pairs and did an interview using the same questions and the same prop in pairs in front of the class. And I try to record them, video them when they do these types of activities. Presentations are also a great type of activity to give our students a chance to show what they can say. And before we finish, I just want to talk a little bit more about a particular presentation that I did with my year 6 class. Okay, but the general procedure is the same for any level. So this was a presentation for a holiday destination. Okay, so first we read a brochure, a holiday brochure, which is in Hero 6. We read that, we did some comprehension activities. Then we used the headings from that brochure to help us with our presentation. So the headings were transport, accommodation, typical food or drink, and attractions, things to see. The students then, on the computers, researched a holiday destination of their choice, and they wrote notes under those headings. Then I got them to practice in pairs, giving their little presentation to each other using the notes that they had taken. It's really important for them to practice, especially the lower levels and for the shyer students. Finally, they got to show what they can say, and they gave their holiday presentations in front of the class. And on the slide, you can see one of my students standing in front of the whiteboard. Now, when I do these show what you can say activities, I like to use props where possible, but also I like to project something onto the whiteboard behind them. It's just a bit more motivating, gives more of a feeling of show. So in this case, I just projected a photo of the holiday destination that they were talking about onto the whiteboard behind them. So here you can see Uriol in front of a photo of New York. Right, then each student comes and presents to the rest of the class, and I like to video them when they do this. Why? Because they love to watch it afterwards. If there's any way you can share them with parents, it's great for parents to see. And also as a teacher, it's so useful to watch the videos again when it comes to giving them assessment levels for their speaking. Okay. Anyway, so my students gave their presentations. What I want to show you now are 2 audio clips from my year 6 class. One is one of my lowest level students giving his holiday presentation, and then the next one is a higher level student. So first, let's listen to my lower level student giving his presentation.
Hello everybody, I am speak a city. I visit to London, a bridge. The food is fish and chips, and go to a plane in. I am sleep to a hotel or a house.
Okay, so that's my lower level student. Now, before we go on, I think that he did this speaking activity successfully for him. He did not manage to use complete sentences, no, but he included all the points I asked them to include: transport, accommodation, food, and attractions. He managed to communicate those main ideas while he was speaking. So for his level, he managed to do this task successfully, and he felt good about himself after. Because we talked at the beginning about the problem with different abilities. And this is a task, a speaking activity that low level and higher level can do, but we have to accept that they'll do it differently. Okay? So now let's listen to a higher level student in my class do the same task.
Hello, my name is Uriol, and now I'm going to explain you New York. New York is a city in the USA, and you can go by airplane or a boat, and you can stay in a hotel or in a very big house. You can go with your family or with your parents. And the typical food is fish and chips, Frankfurt, and pizza. You can visit the Empire State Building and the Statue of Liberty, and it's a very good city because it's very beautiful. Bye bye.
That's Uriol. And of course, he managed to use complete sentences. He also included all the points I asked him to include. He managed to communicate his ideas clearly, and he felt really good about himself because he managed to give that presentation in front of the class. They both managed to do the task, even though they are different levels in the same class. Now, before we finish, I just want to go back to what I was saying about correction. Because when I do these types of freer speaking tasks, when they get to show what they can say, I think it's better not to correct them while they're speaking. And I prefer to give general correction at the end. So what I try to do is while they're speaking, I try to keep a note of maybe one mistake each student makes. And it will normally be a mistake that is at their level. So I'm not going to correct them on something that is way above their level, but that they took a risk for. I'm only going to correct them with things that I think they should know. So with these, so what I do is after they've done their presentations and I've made a note of general mistakes that I heard, then I write those mistakes on the whiteboard and I ask the class to correct them together. Here's an example on the slide. So this way, students aren't feeling embarrassed and it's not putting anyone on the spot. Although from my experience, often students will own their own mistake. They'll say, oh, that was me. I know what I meant to say. And they will correct their own mistake, which is great. So I display the mistakes. And from these two audios, these are the two mistakes I chose. So from the lower level student, I chose a mistake. You can go to plane. Because we had already studied in class that we say you can go by plane. So most of the students should be able to correct that, including that low level student. And then from the higher level student, from Uriol, I chose this sentence from what he said. It's a good city because is very beautiful. So I wanted them to correct it by saying because it is very beautiful, because we need to have the subject before the verb in English, and they should know that at year 6. So that's how I go about correction when it comes to these show what you can say, freer speaking activities. Okay, before we finish then, let me just try and sum up. In conclusion, what I've been trying to say is that in order to help our students speak English successfully in the English classroom, we need to model so they know what to say and how to say it. We need to provide them with practice, lots and lots of practice. Usually it will be talking to the person next to them, but sometimes we need to use activities which motivate them and make our classes a bit more dynamic. And finally, we need to give them the chance to show what they can do, what they can say via freer speaking activities. Above all, I hope that that you go away feeling that it's good to talk in our English classrooms. So thank you very, very much for watching. Thank you for joining us. I know that this is your free time and we really appreciate it. I hope it's been helpful and useful. And please, if you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. So send us questions or comments now.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Emma. It's been really good, so practical, and so I think very clearly explained. I love the way that the staging, the clear setting up of activities and providing the environment for the children to demonstrate their best, I think, and giving all students the opportunity to show, as you say, what they can do. And that came across really, really clearly. So thank you so much for that. And it was lovely to hear the children practicing. Like you said, practice, practice, practice. But what I liked as well was the fact that practice in different contexts or with a variety of activities, so important, because if we do the same type of activity over and over again, it obviously will have an effect on motivation, and that you could see in those activities or hear in those activities how engaged the pupils were, not only the pupils that we were listening to who were doing the activity, say in the foreground, but we could hear the other ones in the background as well. And everybody was engaged and involved. And as you say, we're not concentrating on as such the language, or maybe not aware that they were using English or that this was an English class, but they were really involved in the activity. So that's lovely. And the same for the games, the flashcard games, for example, on the whiteboard. Lovely, lovely ideas. Okay, so as Emma said, if you have any comments or questions, please share them with us now. We do have one from Alexandra. She asks, how do you control the students who go off track and speak in Spanish or take advantage to play instead of doing the activity? Any ideas?
So I think that's where modeling the activity as opposed to the language is so important, because I think often when children go off track, it's because they're not really sure what they have to do. And so that's why, especially of younger levels, but all levels, to be honest, I find that playing games as a class first really helps with that, because then they know what they're doing. And if they don't all manage to keep on track, the fact that most of them can means that you can then go and talk to the odd student that isn't managing to keep on track, and you can say, come on now, you know what you have to do. Because that's where class management is so important. So there'll always be some students who will go off focus, but sometimes students do that when they don't know what they're meant to be doing. And in terms of them speaking Spanish, or in my case, Catalan in the classroom, again, that can sometimes be because we haven't modeled enough what they need to say in English. Sometimes, not always. So really, I think that's why it's so important to model, practice, do the game as a class first. Then there's more chance that most of them will keep on track and most of them will be able to speak in English most of the time, but not all the time. You heard in my audio that they spoke Catalan for a little bit, but they because they couldn't say that bit in English, but the bits they could say in English, they did. So really, I think it's that if we really prepare them, then they're more likely to keep focused and more likely to keep in English.
Great, absolutely. And I thought it was interesting as well about correction, your ideas about correction and doing group correction after the show what you can do, and just focusing on specific or errors that are relevant to the level. So that
I think we have to be really careful not to correct them on mistakes which are above their level. Because then we're going to make them feel like they shouldn't bother trying to make that, they shouldn't bother trying to take that risk because they're just going to be corrected on it. So let's just keep to what they know, especially for the higher level students. So I really think we need to
Yes,
correct them on what we expect them to know, not things which are above their level. Let those
yes,
go.
and
It
not
doesn't
stop
matter.
them.
Yeah, and not
Exactly, and
stop
not
them.
stop them from trying. No, and as you say, take a risk, jump into the swimming pool, as it were, and have a go.
I
And
think speaking in a
yeah,
foreign language, I mean, from my own experience, and probably for you, Louise, it's really difficult. It's really
it
putting
is.
yourself out there.
It
And I think
is.
our students feel the same. And so we have to try and make atmospheres in our classrooms where they feel like we're not going to correct them on everything. And, you know, we're not going to
Yes,
expect perfection. Otherwise, they're not going to speak. So, for example, when I
exactly.
do my class rules with my class, that's one of the things I focus on right at the beginning. And I say to them, in this classroom, we don't laugh at each other for when we make a mistake. We don't point fingers at each other. I said, because if I had to speak to you in Spanish or Catalan, well, I would be making mistakes, and that's fine. And I think you need to make that kind of an atmosphere in your classroom, especially for speaking, because it is really putting you out there. It's not like writing where it's all
Exactly.
private. It's
Exactly.
open. Yeah.
Exactly. And also the purpose of speaking is to communicate, and the purpose of
Yes.
communicating is to get an idea across.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
you when you were comparing the two pupils, the lower level and the higher level, and you I think very importantly pointed out that both were successful at
Oh, yeah.
completing
I mean,
the
honestly, for
task
that lower
at their
level student,
level, at
yeah,
their
yeah.
level.
Yeah, they both included everything. They both communicated their general ideas. And we've
Exactly.
got to accept that that's a really important part of speaking. As I said, like
Exactly.
really accuracy, yes, when we're focusing on sounds, when we're focusing at the beginning, but then we've got to focus on, are they getting their idea across? And that counts for a lot,
Exactly.
I think.
Absolutely. Well, no, absolutely, because we know in real life that's
Yes.
key, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're in a
Yeah.
train station and you're asking, or you want to buy a ticket to go somewhere, it's not about all the, have you got it absolutely correctly,
No.
all the elements of the question. Rather, the key elements, are they there? And can I communicate that sufficiently to be able to get my ticket, buy my ticket, and go to the place
Exactly.
where,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we want to give them
So
praise for when
really
they
good
manage to
point.
communicate. Mm.
Exactly. Fantastic. Okay. Also comments to say thank you. Thank you very much for this lovely presentation. Really clear, and some lovely ideas. And so, Emma, really, it's been great. Thank you so much. Don't go away though. At the end, we'll all come back
Yeah.
together again. And so now I would like to introduce Jose Maria Ramirez, who's going to give a short presentation on Heroes, the primary course, the Macmillan Education primary course for levels 1 to 6. So welcome, Jose Maria. Hola, ¿qué tal?
Buenas tardes a todos.
Buenas
Buenas
tardes.
tardes.
Vale. Perfecto, todo tuyo, ¿eh?
Muy bien, pues voy. Buenas tardes a todos. Permitidme que dediquemos unos minutos a conocer un poquito más en profundidad Heroes, la serie de la que Emma es coautora, como bien sabéis ya, y que esta serie que tiene tantos profesores contentos y tantos alumnos satisfechos y que se utiliza ya en tantos colegios en España. Permitidme que dediquemos un ratito a conocer las claves de Heroes, los componentes, tanto para los profes como para los alumnos, la oferta digital que acompaña a Heroes también. Me gustaría hablaros de qué es ese Macmillan 360 y también, aunque estoy seguro de que muchos conocéis Macmillan Advantage, nuestra plataforma de recursos para los profesores, el área privada de los profes, pues también me gustaría que quienes no lo conozcan tengan la oportunidad de saber la riqueza del material que tenemos en Macmillan Advantage. Estas son las claves de Heroes. La primera, ese enfoque integrado de las 4 destrezas, que como decían ahora Emma y Luis, es tan importante para trabajar en situaciones reales y para que el aprendizaje sea un aprendizaje real. Y junto a ese enfoque integrado de las destrezas, me da pie precisamente para hablar de este contenido del mundo real que envuelve a todos Heroes desde primero hasta sexto. En los primeros cursos, en primero y segundo, hay más mezcla de mundo real con mundo de ficción, con personajes de ficción, pero en realidad a lo largo de toda la serie aparece todo este contenido del mundo real, un lenguaje funcional que es el que aprenden los niños, en situaciones comunicativas reales y con temas pues cercanos a ellos y más cercanos a lo que están viendo en sus coles. Pues todo lo que tiene que ver con reciclaje, con el tema de la familia, los alimentos, los animales que tanto les gustan, la tecnología, etcétera. Así que presentamos situaciones reales en entornos funcionales para que ese aprendizaje sea realmente un aprendizaje de un inglés que se puedan utilizar para comprar un ticket de autobús, por ejemplo, ¿no? Junto a estas dos claves, la tercera clave es este desarrollo de las habilidades para la vida, que son también tan importantes, y veréis en Heroes, si lo conocéis ya lo sabéis, y si no, cuando veáis, veréis que tiene una lección en cada unidad dedicada a estos life skills, donde pretendemos que los alumnos, pretendemos ayudarles a que se conozcan a sí mismos, a tomar decisiones, a convivir, a trabajar en equipo, cada vez más importante. Y por último, otra de las claves importantes de Heroes es la flexibilidad que ofrece, esa flexibilidad con actividades de refuerzo y de ampliación, tanto en el pupils como en el activity o en el workbook, como en el material del profe. Y no solo eso, sino en el resto de componentes que tiene la serie, de la que os voy a hablar un poquito ahora. La idea es que todos aporten, que todos los alumnos aporten lo que puedan, como estaba diciendo Emma hace un momento, que todos tengan éxito, que todos alcancen el aprendizaje que pueden, y para eso les ayudamos desde Heroes. Hablando de los componentes de los alumnos, como siempre, los alumnos tienen el Pupils Book, que tiene una oferta digital de la que os hablo ahora en un momentito. También el Workbook. Junto a ese Workbook hay una versión nueva del Workbook, ese Essential Activity Book. Y lo que pretendemos también con este Essential Activity Book es, como decíamos antes, integrar a todos los alumnos, que todos los alumnos, los que pueden más, hagan más, y los que necesitan un poquito más de apoyo, que tengan una versión del Activity Book, quizás más sencilla, con un trabajo más guiado, pero lo que nos permite es integrarlos dentro del aula, y que si todos estamos en la unidad 5 y en la lección 4, pues que estos alumnos que tienen su Essential Workbook también estén dentro de la unidad 5 y de la lección 4. Y también este Grammar Practice del que os hablo en un momentito, que acompaña a los cursos de los niveles 3 a 6. Junto a esa oferta digital, junto a esa oferta empresa, también la oferta digital que acompaña a la oferta empresa es el Pupils Book ebook que tienen los alumnos gratuitamente cuando compran el libro, una versión digital de su libro, donde acceden a los audios, acceden a los vídeos, etc. El Pupils Resource Pack, donde tendrán la oportunidad de descargarse los audios en formato MP3, y este Pupils Practice Kit, que es realmente algo muy importante y muy relevante dentro de la oferta digital de Heroes, y que os hablo de ello en un instante. En cuanto a los componentes para el profe, como siempre, ya lo conocéis, Teachers Book, esos teachers que tenéis en formato impreso y también en formato digital, y como siempre, flashcards, los audios, el pack de pósters, los Teachers Resource Pack, que sabéis que tenéis para cada uno de los cursos, y ese Communication Kit, que también es un material extra, que gusta muchísimo y que funciona muy bien para hacer actividades comunicativas con todos los alumnos. Dentro de la oferta digital de los profes, también tenéis este Teachers Presentation Kit, que es vuestra herramienta de aula. El Test Generator, que realmente, bueno, yo siempre digo en los colegios que es la bomba, sinceramente, porque con este Test Generator tenéis la posibilidad de, por nivel y por unidad, crear vuestro propio examen, componer el examen con todos los ítems que os ofrecemos para que hagáis el examen que queráis, y que podáis disponer incluso de listenings integrados dentro de cada uno de los exámenes, y podéis componer uno para cada curso o como queráis. Y junto a eso también tenéis el Teacher Resource Center, donde además hay más elementos de evaluación, donde tenéis digitalizado todo el material que hay impreso en la serie, y donde tenéis todo ese material extra de refuerzo y de ampliación del que estábamos hablando hace un momento. Hace un instante os hablaba del Pupils Practice Kit como parte de la oferta digital de los alumnos, y quería detenerme un poquito en ello porque este Pupils Practice Kit en realidad es muy rico. Disponen los alumnos en él de los vídeos, disponen de todas las canciones en formato karaoke también, pero además disponen de actividades de gramática y de vocabulario de cada una de las unidades y de cada una de las lecciones donde haya gramática y vocabulario, en un entorno más lúdico que les permita trabajar lo mismo que están trabajando en el aula, pero no necesariamente las mismas actividades que han visto en el aula. Junto a ese Pupils Practice Kit, el Pupils Resource Pack que os decía antes, donde los alumnos pueden descargarse en un pincho en su ordenador los audios y los listenings, etcétera, las versiones ebook del Pupils Book que decía que acompañan gratuitamente al Pupils o al Activity, pero además, si vuestro centro es digital, pues tenéis la opción de tener los Digital Pupils Book, Digital Workbook o Digital Essential Workbook. Y en cuanto al material del profesor, que estábamos diciendo, yo os hablaba hace un momento del Presentation Kit, que es vuestra herramienta de aula, donde accedéis desde el Presentation Kit, accedéis a vuestro libro en pantalla, con las actividades, con los listenings, con los vídeos y con las actividades del Pupils y del Activity que se ve en la pantalla completa. Desde la misma herramienta del Pupils podéis pasar al Activity, etcétera, y funciona en cualquier sistema operativo y funciona en cualquier dispositivo, que es algo que nos interesa mucho en los coles porque no siempre tenemos los últimos ordenadores o el último modelo de ordenadores y a veces tenemos herramientas un poco obsoletas. Bueno, pues tened claro que podéis utilizarlo en cualquier tipo de ordenador. El Teacher Resource Center, del que os hablaba hace un momento, con todo ese material complementario asociado a cada nivel de Heroes, y lo mismo con el generador de exámenes, que también está asociado a cada nivel y a cada unidad, para que podáis escoger dentro de cada unidad y de cada una de las unidades, dentro de los niveles estándar y high, y poder componer vuestro propio examen. Todo esto lo que hace es ofrecernos una solución flexible para cualquier escenario en el que nos podamos encontrar. Desde los libros tradicionales impresos, que están acompañados por estas versiones digitales, hasta las versiones digitales interactivas del Pupils y del Activity, el Pupils Practice Kit, que dentro de la versión impresa los alumnos disponen de esta herramienta, y de todo el material del profe, incluido el generador de exámenes, incluso Macmillan Advantage, de lo que os voy a contar brevemente en un momentito. Todo esto engloba este Macmillan 360. Macmillan 360 es una idea que se lleva a cabo desde este año pasado, y lo que pretendemos con ello es estar a vuestro lado en cualquiera de las modalidades en las que nos podamos encontrar, sea una enseñanza presencial en clase, enseñanza en casa o una modalidad mixta, como nos hemos estado viendo abocados a trabajar este año. Pues ahí pretendemos ser vuestra solución también y apoyaros, precisamente porque tenemos un servicio técnico de primer nivel. Yo creo que hoy por hoy somos la única editorial que tiene un servicio técnico para las familias, de atención a las familias, de manera que si alguien tiene algún problema con sus licencias digitales, simplemente pueden llamar a nuestro teléfono 900 o a nuestro correo electrónico y rápidamente se ponen en contacto con ellos y les solucionan cualquier incidencia que puedan tener. Y por último, os hablo de Macmillan Advantage, el área privada de los profes. A mí me gusta llamarle este área privada de los profes, donde tenéis acceso a un montón de recursos específicos, creados específicamente para Heroes, junto también a las programaciones y un montón de cosas asociadas a cada nivel y a cada uno de los cursos de Heroes. Pero además, Macmillan Advantage tenemos un montón de recursos para que podáis trabajar en vuestro día a día y para que todas esas actividades extra que se os ocurren en Halloween, en Christmas, Easter, etcétera, un montón de recursos útiles que podéis seleccionar por nivel del marco europeo, por nivel o por el curso en el que estáis. Y junto a ello, pues todo este tipo de webinars y de sesiones a las que os invitamos, que una vez que terminan las colgamos dentro del Macmillan Advantage para que podáis acceder a ellas cuando queráis. Así que, bueno, esto es todo. Muchas gracias por vuestra atención y os dejo de nuevo con Luis.
Muchas gracias, Kuro. Genial, muy claro. Ahora damos una oportunidad al público para que pueda enviar preguntas si tienen comentarios. So, once again, we'll go back to our interaction. If you have any questions or answers, please do send them in now. If you have any questions about what Coro has explained, what Jose Maria has explained about Heroes, the course, the components, the offer, the digital offer for the pupils, for the teachers, also about Advantage, which, as Coro has said, is a really complete offer. You have all the training webinars, including the one today will be up there as well. But we have training webinars that go back now about 6 years. We've been doing these online events for 6 years, and there's a lot of material there which is very relevant, and it's all very practical, just like the session that Emma gave today, very based on classroom practice given by teaching experts, teacher trainers and teachers who are practicing in the classroom. So very much a wonderful website with resources for the course itself, for the levels that you teach, and also resources which are related, so as Kuro said, on festivals, but also other topics as well. There's a whole wealth of resources there. So, well, they're just comments, Kuro. Thank you very much, all very clear. People don't have any questions because you've just explained it perfectly clear. So no questions, that's great. However,
good to know, yeah.
However, if anybody wants to find out any more about this course, this great course, Heroes, we're going to launch a Survey Monkey, and in that there is a question about Heroes. If you want to find out more, please answer that question. So I think we've come to the end. We're all going to come back on the screen together. Hi, Emma, again.
Hi.
And I just want to thank everybody. I do want to say, Emma, there was another question which I didn't get to, okay? And it was by Alexandra, who also asked the question, the other question that I put to you. And she asked if you have any tips about trying to keep, I think what she means about voices down, or trying to kind of lower the volume, if you have any tips about that. Now, I know you said that speaking activities is a time when we have to accept that the volume and the fact that kids are all speaking at once, it's not like more controlled activities. But do you have any tips that you could share, or any advice?
Well, one thing is that's when it's quite good to do these games and activities as a whole class, because then not
Yes.
everyone is speaking at the same time. So I quite like that for that, and I can hear them better. I do think we need to get used to noise sometimes. I think we often feel as English teachers that we're supposed to keep our classes quite quiet. But I always try and say to people, well, if you think about a music lesson, like when the classes are playing the recorder and all of them are playing at the same time, I walk down the corridor and it's really noisy for a little while. I do think we have to get used to the fact that sometimes our classes need to be noisy, like a music lesson. So I think that is something that we need to get used to. And then it really depends on the kind of activities, because when they're doing the kind of show what you can say activities, well, that doesn't tend to be too noisy. No. I have mentioned in another webinar that when you're doing those kind of activities, it's quite a good idea to set a listening task to the rest of the class so that they are quiet and listening to the show what you can say activity. So, for example, when my year 6 were doing the holiday presentations, I gave them a very simple task. The rest of the class that were listening, I literally just asked them to make a note of what was the holiday destination and what was the most interesting thing that they heard to do in that place. So they had to listen, the rest of the class, and keep a note of those things. That keeps the kind of other noise down and helps with class management. But there are times when it's noisy. But those speaking activities
Yes.
where they're all speaking, we're talking about 5 or 10 minutes. No, 5 or
Exactly.
10 minutes.
Exactly.
And so I think we need to get used to saying sometimes it's going to be a bit noisy. I mean, you know, I do the normal things. I'm sure everyone does. You know, we're not on the playground now. We use our classroom voices, keep the noise down. But there are moments when it's noisy. And I think that's okay sometimes. And if the noise is good noise, if the noise is most people speaking English.
Exactly. It's a positive sign, isn't it? Fantastic.
It can
Thank
be.
you for that. Thank you for that. And thank you to everybody. Thank you, Emma, really, for this wonderful talk. It's been really, really good, so practical and so relevant, I think, to the teachers out there. Thank you to Kulo for your great presentation, very clear, heroes, putting it in a very good light. And to everybody out there, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules and sharing your ideas in the chats as well. That's been really appreciated. All the very best, and I really do mean this. I wish you all the very best, the best possible end to this course in a year that's been exceptional, challenging. I don't think there are adjectives that are adequate enough to describe what it's been. It's been a real tough one for everybody, but you've done a fantastic job. So well done to you all. And I hope to see you again in the very near future. All the very best. Goodbye. Thanks.